let me tell you where I'm fighting it. Let me tell you where I've just recently started. Doge is great, but they're trying to cut all the scams, Elon Musk, all this. And so I did a letter, and it was an article that was published recently in some of the national publications. I did the article requesting Mr. Musk to stop the billionaire scam and the billionaire crime of these multi-billion-dollar corporations, oil and gas companies, going after our tax dollars for their own dollar benefit. And if he wants to cut the scam out, it's on the CO2 capture. It's on these big oil and gas companies like Oxy, taking billions of our grandkids' dollars to put a carbon capture plant up in West Texas. That's a billionaire scam, okay? That's what that is. And so I've said, let's go after it on the budget part. And that gives a whole additional different direction of the argument. Rather than CO2 isn't really a problem, so why are we capturing it? You're arguing that forever. This is something I think pretty new we might use to our side to prove it's a scam that's taking billions of our dollars and undoubtedly throwing it after a non-existent problem.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
All right. Well, joining us today is a man who I've just met but already know is a force to be reckoned with. He is the chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Wayne Christian. As commissioner, Christian has been a national leader fighting against radical policies like the Green New Deal, ESG, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a load of garbage, the Paris Climate Agreement, and more. He has stood against many of the policies from the Biden administration, which thankfully is now in the rearview mirror. And he is working in Texas to reestablish the American energy independence alongside the Trump administration. We're so grateful to have you with us today, Mr. Christian, and we're so grateful for the hard work you've been doing, speaking truth to power. Before we get into it, let me read the scripture of the day. It is 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 7 through 8. And this is a good one. They're all good, but this is a really good one. It says, "For God will never give you the spirit of fear, but the Holy Spirit, who gives you mighty power, love, and self-control. So never be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor be embarrassed over my imprisonment, but overcome every evil by the revelation of the power of God." And I was reading that this morning, and, in this passage, Paul was writing from prison to encourage his protege, Timothy, not to live in fear, but instead to live in the power of Holy Spirit inside of him. And we know that 1 John 4 tells us that perfect love casts out all fear. We know that God is perfect love. So these two scriptures reinforce one another. Fear is not from God, but the overcoming power of God lives in us through Holy Spirit. And Paul gives Timothy this instruction, which is a key for us today. He instructs him to overcome evil, every evil, by the revelation of the power of God. So what does that mean? It's that we can't overcome evil by focusing on how evil is. We overcome evil by asking the Lord for a revealing of the truth of his power to prevail over evil. If we believe that Jesus died, went to hell, and took the keys of hell back from Satan and resurrected himself on the third day, we have a revelation of the power of God to triumph over all evil. He's done it decisively and comprehensively already. So what do we even have to fear?
He has absolutely no doubt. You're right, Danielle. He has conquered all evil. As Paul said, where, O death, is your sting? Where, O death, is your victory? Jesus said, all power on heaven and earth have been given to me. We just have to accept it and believe and move in his power, not in our own power. And that's where today, and hopefully every day, as you mentioned, Danielle, at the outset, Wayne Christian, Texas Railroad Commissioner. I had a chance to listen to Commissioner Christian on Moon Griffon's show, our good friend, last week, and I said, I have to have this man on our show. I mean, you talk about speaking truth to power. He has done it. Mr. Christian, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is for you to be on the State of Freedom today, sir.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and I'm excited to be here. I'm glad to hear people that don't mind talking about God, who is the one in control, and Jesus Christ, his son, who gave himself for us, and be unashamed to express that. And what you find in the issues of oil and gas, that I think in many issues, are people say, okay, we need to pick our battles. We need to let them have this argument over here, and that way we can get our argument over here. But when you start accepting lies over here, it pollutes the entire thing. I mean, you can't accept this good and this evil and expect to have good results. I mean, the evil products, and I have so many people say, take the example of what we use politically on both sides of the aisle. We're for all the above energy. No, we're not. We're not for bad energy. We're not for cow manure. We're not for twigs, which, by the way, that sounds rude, but 1/3 of our world, that's the main source of energy, are twigs and cow and manure, animal manure. And that's what's sad. And we're sitting here, God has gifted Louisiana and Texas the largest supply of oil and gas in the free world. And so are we responsible to help these people overseas? I believe that. I believe that's what God's given us the resources to do. Why did he choose Louisiana and Texas to deposit this much? If we were a nation, think of this, folks. We were a nation, we'd be number 4 in oil and gas production, third in oil and gas, third in oil production, 4th in natural gas.
Texas alone, or Texas and Louisiana combined?
Just Texas. Just Texas.
That's amazing.
And Louisiana is right there. And the hope of the free world by Wall Street Journal, all these publications, is LNG. Guess who's the number 1 exporter of LNG? Louisiana, right? With you is Texas. But God has centered the responsibility to save this planet from all the forces to our 2 states. And used his minerals of oil, gas, and coal, by the way, as the resources to do just that. So I feel very responsible to the citizens of Texas. 30 million Texans have entrusted me to look over their natural resources. And how can you do that if you accept, well, a little bit here, a little bit there? And I can go into that later. I talk too much, you'll have to shut me up.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, you don't really talk too much, because unlike some people, what you say actually matters.
Chris, I just wanted to get this in because Commissioner Christian, this is something that I've been dwelling on just the last couple of days. So it's very interesting timing that you're on our show. But the same way that Jesus provides salvation to us, right? It's available to us. Now, whether we take it or not is our choice and it's our responsibility. It's the same exact thing with, I think that the analogy of the energy that we're sitting on is a perfect representation of the gift of salvation that's also available to us in the spiritual and eternal realm. And that may seem a little bit of a ridiculous analogy to draw, but here we are. We've been wringing our hands saying, how do we get lower gas prices? How do we build industry in a dried up place called South Louisiana? And we're sitting on it. We're sitting on top of it. So I just appreciate your no-nonsense approach. I just have to say, hearing you say that we are not for an all-of-the-above approach. No, we're not for an all-of-the-above approach. We're not for those stupid wind turbines that are killing things and going to destroy the Gulf of America.
Yes.
For fishermen.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And you listen to the wind turbines, and Texas is so guilty. We are so guilty in Texas. I mean, I sit through Storm Uri down at my place and was for 5 days without electricity, okay? That was a miserable experience for a lot of people, for a lot of places. And we proved during that time, wind and solar went to 5% and 0%, I think, during that time. Natural gas provided 85% of the energy delivered was natural gas. But since that time, the idiocy of this thing, I did a piece in the Wall Street Journal, believe it or not, 1 month after Uri. And basically what I said was, we have spent so much money to Red China for these windmills and solar panels. We have spent so much on unreliable energy. We let the pilot light go out on reliable energy in Texas. And that's exactly, but since that time, here's the craziness. Since that time, Texas has since increased wind and solar to the point we're now number 1 in the nation in wind. This summer became number 1 in the nation in solar production. Now, what sanity is there? We've increased our population, which increases the demand, but we have decreased the reliability of our energy resources. This is currently what's going on in our state. And somebody had better wake up to this, because we used to not have to talk about rolling blackouts in Texas. Guess what? We talk about it every day now in Texas. Why is this? Because we've refused to expand any natural gas electric generation. We refused any nuclear whatsoever. And we have retired our coal and lithium backup. I mean, our coal backup, not lithium, coal, lignite.
Yeah. So it looks like there's two issues here, Commissioner Christian. One is, let's just assume for a moment that CO2 production, excess CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide is a threat to public welfare, is a threat to the environment. Assuming that, even if that's the case, it's been demonstrated that the solutions that are being offered to that in the form of this CCS, these wind turbines, all that, they don't work, okay? It's obvious they don't work. But the fundamental issue and what this whole racket seems to be predicated on is the finding of the Clean Water Act in 2009 under Obama, that carbon dioxide emissions are a threat to human life, or a threat to the ecology and all that. So my question to you is, CO2 is 0.004% of the environment. Of that, as you pointed out on Moon Show, 5 to 6% of that, less than 1%, is man-made. So where are they coming up with this? Where's the science, Commissioner Christian, to back up the idea that carbon dioxide emissions pose a threat to the planet?
It's not science. It was a 5-4 decision before the Supreme Court several years back, where they challenged, they ran, this whole thing is a racket of follow the money. You look back to the 70s, and it was the Arctic Ice Age, front page of the Time magazine. 2 years later, it was global warming. Then later it was environmental change. And then it was climate change. Then now they've started picking out the gases one at a time. And so they finally ran this thing up to the Supreme Court, and one of the judges did the dissenting opinion on the court case, where they, during the more liberal court of Barack Obama, decided that yes, CO2 was a poisonous gas. And so whether they implemented it or not is up to the administrations as such. That's why we're having some relief right now. But the fact is, the dissenting opinion said you can't declare a naturally occurring substance as being a threat to the natural environment, and yet we have. So this is a 5-4 legal. It's not science, it's a law. And so we're sitting here with a court decision that is declared. Now, currently, today, they are debating in committee. The EPA, the new director, has asked that they do away with methane, CO2 as being a dangerous substance, okay? And they're having that argument today. But thank goodness, thank God, we're having that discussion in Washington to make the truth come out. CO2 is not a danger to the environment. It's needed for plants. It's needed for food. It is a political money grab deal. Let me give you an example of currently. The folks right now, the chairman of Oxy, okay, 2 months before the election, had a discussion in a hotel room where we're having a fundraiser with Donald Trump. She and some other major company heads, and said, don't do away with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest scam in the history of the United States, as pointed out today in the newspaper. The largest scam in history is the Inflation Reduction Act, money just being thrown out to anything. But they asked him not to do away with it when he got elected because they were making so much money on it. A week later, that same president said that the biggest threat to mankind is the existential threat of climate change. And the Exxon chairman asked he not get out of the Paris Accord. These are our major oil companies. And what's happening is our own oil and gas major international corporations are begging to keep the CO2 dangerous. Why? Oxy just put $1.8 billion outside of Midland in a carbon capture plant that captures carbon out of the atmosphere, sticks it in the ground. Well, what's going to happen to that if all of a sudden we say there's nothing wrong with CO2? What are they going to do with that $2 billion? And by the way, they didn't pay for it. We taxpayers paid the $2 billion for it. We had Petronova down in Houston, was the first and biggest CO2 capture facility about 7 years ago. Me, Rick Perry, and Greg Abbott were there for the ribbon cutting of Petronova carbon capture plant. Take carbon, capture it, stick it in the ground, increase production, they said, for oil and gas. went broke in 2 years, bankrupt, couldn't make any money. Guess what? They just reopened a year ago. Petronova. How? Our tax dollars. It is a money scam.
That is so sick. On the point of this carbon capture nonsense, we in Louisiana had an explosion a couple years ago in a lake where there was a carbon capture facility underneath the lake, and the lake blew up as a result of that. Is there some kind of slow release valve put on these things so that when the scam is finally uncovered as such, we're not just sitting on a bunch of landmines waiting for the ground beneath us to explode?
I have no idea what dangers are being put there, and I have not heard that. So I'm not
Okay.
going to advocate that there's some kind of danger. What I do know is they've been fighting this in either North or South Dakota. This is the craziness up there. They have gone into the ethanol plants, which were a scam to start with there. Ethanol makes your car motor not real loud and tears up your lawnmower. And it was nothing but to grab agriculture by greed. It was a greedy deal, which was unnecessary, but it screwed up our entire gas supply with this ethanol. Okay. So they have ethanol plants, and they came in now, Biden did, and they did a CO2 capture over the ethanol plant. How's that for double dollars to screw things up? And so the argument is the landowners across their states didn't want them exporting that CO2 in a pipeline across their property. Now, this is oil-friendly country, by the way. These are landowners that are farmers, ranchers that love oil, but they don't want the CO2 pipes. Why? Because if you have a leak in a CO2 pipe, it can hurt people for several miles around. It stays on the ground. Natural gas leaves up in the atmosphere and goes up and goes away and doesn't hurt anybody. Not CO2. It spreads out. So that's your danger, that landowners have fought that move up in North or South Dakota.
Yeah.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slenderize drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slenderize drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slenderize drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom. Now, you mentioned Commissioner Zeldin taking a look with the EPA at some of this Obama-era nonsense. Do you have any insight into what policies may get reversed coming out of that review?
Well, of course, we're getting policies reversed by the administration, which is wonderful. But the trouble is, when the Supreme Court passed that, making it into law, it's going to take some legislation to allow that. Also, a lot of this DOGE stuff, kind of second subject, they're making a list right now. Senator Graham was talking about it last night. And what they're going to do, all this stuff the Supreme Court says you can't do this, can't do that, or they're going to put it all in a bill and hopefully get all that passed as legislation. So that's kind of the fight we see going on here.
Yeah.
Is which stuff sticks when they throw it out there, kind of throwing everything against the wall. What doesn't stick, they're going to put in a package and try to move it through as legislation. So this is a fight for a lot of things. So CO2 is part of this. Now, they can definitely start pulling back, as you ask, on current policies. Problem is, what happens to the next president?
Right.
Unless we put it into law.
You're
and
right.
That's kind of what they're working at now. Why it's before a committee now, why they're talking about doing away with CO2, methane, these others being a dangerous substance and chemical. And how can you pass, just think of this, how does the Supreme Court pass a law that people talk about science? Science is never settled. And yet a law has been passed declaring CO2 forever is dangerous. What if we discover something else? What if science, of course they already have,
Right.
CO2 is plant food, So anyhow,
Yeah.
it's a sick mess, but our own industry is our current biggest enemy because they want the money.
Yeah.
There's big money in this government giveaway from us, my grandkids. I've already spent my money. And so the problem is you've got all these folks with a handout, and then in our legislators, here's the game they look at. They're told, well, representative or senator, your home district is going to get X billion dollars.
Yeah.
from this carbon capture dollar. Are you really going to tell your home folks you kept them from creating new jobs in your home district? And I tell people, well, there's lots of ways you can make money. You can have illegal drugs, you can have prostitution, you can have child labor, but it doesn't make it right. And that's back to our original point. God says there's this that's right, this that's wrong. And you can't let this part in because, hey, it'll give us a lot of good jobs, so we can take that. And that makes everything okay. No, if it's half wrong, it's total wrong.
Yeah. And touching on that, Commissioner Christian, I hear politicians here in Louisiana, when you say, look, this is not based on science, this is a racket that would not be profitable in private enterprise. The only reason why it is even facially viable is because of our money, taxpayer money here. And they say, well, the argument is, they say, is that CCS projects will bring jobs. Some of the projects are already going forward. If the Trump administration finds, Commissioner Christian, that CO2 is not a threat, and if that becomes the decided policy of the Trump administration, since some of these projects are already going forward and people are putting food on their table now through these projects, what are the economic implications of a reversal of that policy? And will that cause distress in the economy, or will there be plenty of jobs available in light of the fact that President Trump is reigniting the oil and gas industry?
Change at any level at any time will cause some pain. That's the current argument you're hearing, all these tariffs going on, whatever like that. When you turn a ship around in the mess the size of our bureaucracy and all the other dollars going out. So certainly when you cut off the spigot to that dollar, some are going to scream. That's it. But the answer is what is right, what is wrong, and what is best for our country. And if we keep spending trillions of dollars for crazy projects like CO2 capture, which is insanity, it accomplishes nothing but increase the cost of our energy. This isn't for free. Either the taxpayer or the consumer pays for this stuff. And if you do all this treatment to whatever chemical it is, it's going to increase the cost of that. So both the consumer and the taxpayer paid for it are going to see higher costs. What's the biggest threat to our country? Hyperinflation. And we are well on our way. So every time we spend $2 trillion in the Inflation Reduction Act that these major companies want to keep coming in and all these new jobs we're going to create with that, well, that's going to be great. But when the price of groceries keeps going up and eventually gets to the point that you can't afford anything, then you got Venezuela to look at.
Yeah.
You've got wealth of oil, wealth of riches, but the cost of things is so high that the dollar bill buys what a penny does. And we've even made illegal the penny now. That's your problem, is hyperinflation. And that's what happens if you keep spending all this money just to create happy days here again.
Yeah.
That comes to a screeching halt when the bill comes due on it.
Yeah.
Well, and on that same line of thought, those Obama era policies that we discussed that set all of this into motion have devastated the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. I think Texas is better positioned than Louisiana. Many of our people that worked in that industry went to Texas for work. And towns across the Gulf Coast have lost their lifeblood. The economic power of the South Louisiana where I live is petering along. It's not in great shape. If we are truly moving under Trump to drill baby drill time, what advice would you give to the Louisiana government, to our elected officials, to position us to attract those people back? Because I think Texas is already pretty well positioned, but we're not.
Well, and it wasn't really their fault. Let me tell you, it wasn't really their state legislators' fault. What it is the federal government can close down federal properties, federal lands. Louisiana has much more federal property and lands than does the state of Texas. The state of Texas has a lot more private property percentage-wise. Our entire public land system is on the colleges, university, is all under the Land Commission, separate from the Railroad Commission, millions of dollars a month coming in those royalties, but those are not federal properties as such. So because Texas didn't have that much federal property, we had mostly independent. We kept pumping, we kept drilling, we kept going during all this because Biden couldn't shut us down. We became the hope to the free world was the energy production of Texas because we didn't have all that much of government property. So Louisiana sadly had more government property as many other states did. And that's why the feds were able to camp you down. Wasn't your state government. It was the feds because they controlled the leasing on that property.
Yeah, that makes sense. From an environmental standpoint here, Commissioner Christian, I remember watching a number of scientists testifying on climate change before a congressional committee. And one of the congressmen asked them, these are supposed to be experts in the environment and experts on carbon capture and carbon dioxide emissions. And he asked them, what percent of the environment is made up of carbon dioxide? Not one of them could answer the question. Not one. And finally, he said it's 0.004. And then he made your point that less than about 5% of that 0.004 is caused by man-made activity. So what happens, Commissioner Christian? I know you're not a scientist, but what happens if that 0.004 gets lower and lower and lower, assuming, the climate alarmists get everything that they want and the emissions of carbon dioxide start to go down? Don't plants and animals at some point start to die?
Yes, definitely. Man dies out. Get this point religiously. I want you to back off and say, are they actually against mankind? Take the World Economic Forum and Prince Philip, this is King Charles's daddy that married Queen Elizabeth. Okay, he was asked when they were passing this climate, global warming, all this carbon capture, all this environmental stuff at the World Economic Forum. He said that he was asked, Prince Philip, if you could do what you wanted to help the environment, what would it be? He said, I would die and come back as a poisonous virus and kill 1.5 billion people. Part of their agenda at the World Economic Forum is depopulation. They had a seminar at the World Economic Forum just a couple of years back by a gentleman that said how to compassionately reduce the population by 2 billion. Compassionately reduce. So understand, it is a religion. When you hear green, is worshiping Mother Earth. What's best for Mother Earth? What's best for her? No, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. I'll shut it up.
In their view, fewer people, right? In their view, fewer people.
And depopulation is part of their agenda. Digest that. Population. So they're not for people. They're worshiping, it's like Baal. They worship Mother Earth. You can't improve creeks and say, for example, we wanted to take a creek. And this is an example, it's been there. A creek and make it flow better, increase clean water to help crops, plants, people, and everything. The greenies are opposed to that. Why? It changes Mother Nature. That shows who their God is. They worship the God. And look at every one of these arguments, you'll find that's the case. It's not for mankind that they're for. And so the question you need to ask people, are you for what's best for you and your children and mankind? Is that your desire? Or are you best for what's nature and Mother Earth? Those are two different scenarios.
Yeah. Are they trying? So is it too crass, Commissioner Christian, to say that these global elites are trying to kill us?
They're trying to take back control. It's called by the World Economic Forum the Great Reset. The Great Reset. It's their official program. It's to change power back pre-World War II so the lords and the ladies can control the planet and take care of us ignorant citizens across the world.
Useless
we had
eaters.
A war in 1776 to escape elitist controlling the common man. But that is their agenda back. Let me give you a real quick example of how dangerous all this green stuff is. And it's 3 illustrations. 1, 80% of world energy comes from oil, gas, and coal. 80% of world energy. 5 to 6% comes from windmills and solar panels. In fact, but it only does one product, electricity. So that means, and you can't have wind and solar without oil and gas because you can't make the plastics, you can't lubricate it, you can't make the fiberglass, nothing. If you do away with oil and gas like they have tried to do, period. So they're trying to shut down oil and gas, then you shut down all world energy. People will freeze to death and die because they'll have no heat in wintertime. So you kill billions of people by doing away with oil and gas. Secondly, food. Right now, fertilized food, which is natural gas, ammonia, natural gas is fertilizer, feeds 12 points. Organic food without fertilizer, oil and gas, you can feed 4 billion. Math problem. There's 8 billion folks on the planet. 1 out of 2 will die. Last thing is think about this. people keep saying, well, if the price of oil goes up, then the price of gasoline, transportation, all will go up. True. But they don't also say 97% of consumer products rely on oil and gas. 97%, including, let's just take one product, medicine. So if you do away with oil and gas, you do with medicine. Guess what will happen if you don't have medicine? Billions of people will die. This is how serious and insane this is. Europe has already proven this. France, Germany, their electric prices, because they've sat here and taken Vladimir Putin's pipeline of natural gas and shut down all of their coal, all of their fossil fuel production, and have gone to wind and solar. And all of a sudden, their price for energy is 11 to 12 times what it is. And people can't heat their homes, and people are dying from lack of way to heat. So it's a serious situation that I think we gloss over so quickly that we're for all the above energy. No, we're for the best energy for our people.
Yeah. And your point, Commissioner Christian, is that there are two different objectives here. Our objective, your objective, is to serve humanity,
Yes.
is to serve mankind. Their objection is to serve what you call is their God, which is the planet or the environment. Whereas Mother Earth, we're supposed to subdue it for our benefits, not harm it, be good stewards of it, but it's supposed to exist for our service. It's not the other way around.
That's right.
A quick question here before we go on here, Commissioner Christian. You said that 5 to 6% of energy can be produced by the solar, by the wind turbines and all that. Well, first of all, in order to get those things to produce energy, you got to have wind. Okay, so you're dependent upon wind to get it. Are you saying that 5 to 6%, is that reliable? Is that consistent? Can we even give them the 5 to 6% is what I'm saying?
No, it's unreliable energy. That's by definition. You can't rely on it except when the wind blows or the sun shines. So what happens during, that's just, yes, unreliable. But currently, entire calculations you get, and these probably give and take, whatever, 5 to 6% of world energy comes from wind or solar. That's what they say. And if that's the case, and that's not consistent, it'll vary like crazy. But if that's the case, you still cannot have world energy without oil, gas, and coal.
Yeah, it's still it'd still be a catastrophe.
But it is. Go back to Storm Uri. I mean, we had a perfect example. Yet the state of Texas still, over the last 20 years, has sent something like $20 billion to Red China to buy windmills and solar panels and batteries, to drag them over here, and then local sales abatements by local communities to prop up these windmills and solar panels. And we find ourselves increasing population and decreasing reliable energy supply. It's insanity. And that's where our tax dollars paid for all this pain. And we continue to do that. That's what just blows my mind. Here our big oil companies are telling us, oh, keep this carbon capture stuff. Keep this Green Deal. Don't get out of the Paris Accord. I mean, and here is the government regulator in Texas for the state of Texas. I'm sitting here, hold it. Their goal is to shut down oil and gas companies are helping them with their goal to shut down oil and gas. Yeah. Yes, it's insane.
It's insane.
And it's the money. It's the money, as you said. Yeah.
It's all about the money.
Exactly. Well, they've obviously been infiltrated by Marxists whose goal is more about, I guess their goal, I don't know. It ultimately comes down to incentives. And you've talked a little bit about the federal incentives. What other incentives need to change? Because it's not just federal money that's fueling this insanity.
Well, the biggest part of it is the insanity of that. The other part is this view, the religion that people have. I can go into a conservative community in Texas, a good conservative club, a church. You go in there and ask in a church house, I can give this speech to an extent of radical right wing, like I'm saying right now. But I can leave that, and I'll have some sweet lady come up to me and said, well, Commissioner, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm concerned about, the air and the water quality for my grandchildren and that. And I'm thinking, lady, what planet are you living on that we're having a clean water problem in the state of Texas? Where is the air unbreathable in the state of Texas? And yet people live under this, and they've been convinced that there is a problem where there is not. Let me tell you, Chris talked about the responsibility of cleaning the planet. The last 50 years, this is EPA, there are, of the 10 or 12 poisonous gases the EPA defines. We have doubled the population, tripled the use of machinery in this country, but we have decreased those gases by 80%. 80%. We are the cleanest industrialized planet on planet Earth country. Let me give you this too. Every country that has oil is richer than every country that doesn't have oil. Every country that's richer is cleaner than every country that's poorer. That means every country that has oil is cleaner than every country that doesn't have oil. If you want to have a cleaner planet, get oil. That's just common logic.
This is why they stopped teaching logic in schools, obviously.
Absolutely. Commissioner Christian, I want to tell you about a bill. We do a lot of advocacy work over here in Louisiana, CAG, Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. And one of our legislators, I mean, we've had major pushback in Louisiana in a lot of parishes against this CCS. One of the bills that's being offered this session that's coming up in April would reverse state policy in Louisiana, and it would allow local parishes and local municipalities to make individualized decisions about whether or not they want carbon capture sequestration in their parishes. Now, obviously, we'd like to do away with it altogether, but it seems like that legislation, if it's successful, would at least give localities some autonomy in that decision about whether or not they have it in their parishes. What are your thoughts on that as far as having that versus having a uniform statewide policy that allows these private corporations to come in, seize people's private property under eminent domain, and put all these pipelines across their property? What I'm getting at here is that we might have to get you over here in April to come testify in front of the Natural Resources Committee here in Louisiana, and I'll get a chance to meet you as well when you come over. But I want to get your thoughts on that. On how allowing the local municipalities to make the decision. Would that change anything? Is what I'm getting at.
Well, you got good, bad, and ugly in what local desires are. It would make it harder to rule against this scam of anything if you have everybody different being able to handle it. We in Texas have pretty good easement rights or property rights on pipelines and other infringements on private property. So we guard that very carefully over here. I'm not familiar with Louisiana laws on all that. I don't know.
So Wayne, here's the question then. So eminent domain in Louisiana now legislatively allows private corporations to go in under eminent domain, which is supposed to be only a public right, only a government right, only the government for an established public good is allowed to go in and seize property for fair market value under fair negotiations. But this law allows the private corporations under eminent domain to go in and seize property. That doesn't exist in Texas.
There are certain industries which have been proven, I don't know if it's electric or something like that, that has certain rights to get eminent domain, but very, very, very limited, not oil pipelines, etc.
And not CCS.
Okay. And so, here's what I'm hearing. It sounds like a state law that needs to be changed. And that sounds like a state law problem. So I would think the place to fight that one is change the eminent domain laws, however they're statured, to allow those private groups to do this. That's where it needs to be fought. I'm afraid if you spread it out among all the parishes, you're going to have a hodgepodge of mixed whatever, which is not good for any economy. When you start having more controls on anything, that's confusion, uncertainty, which harms your economy.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It harms the economy. So I would think it would be more efficient to just battle those bad laws at the state capitol in Baton Rouge. And you have people like Chuck Owen and others that's going to fight it for you, good people like him that are on our side on these issues. So that's where I'd say your state government is where I think that should be fought.
And Chris, I think we need to bring some legislation that says that carbon capture sequestration is not a public good. If we have a law that says that it's not a public good, would that undermine the eminent domain?
Let me tell you where I'm fighting it. Let me tell you where I've just recently started. Doge is great, where they're trying to cut all the scams, Elon Musk, all this. And so I did a letter. It was an article that was published recently in some of the national publications. And I did the article requesting Mr. Musk to stop the billionaire scam and the billionaire crime of these multi-billion-dollar corporations, oil and gas companies, going after our tax dollars for their own dollar benefit. And if he wants to cut the scam out, it's on this CO2 capture. It's on these big oil and gas companies like Oxy, taking billions of our grandkids' dollars to put a carbon capture plant up in West Texas. That's a billionaire scam. Okay, that's what that is. And so I've said, let's go after it on the budget part. And that gives a whole additional different direction of the argument. Rather than CO2 isn't really a problem, so why are we capturing it? You're arguing that forever. This is something I think pretty new we might use to our side to prove it's a scam that's taking billions of our dollars and undoubtedly throwing it after a non-existent problem.
Yeah, that's so true. Is there any doubt in your mind, Commissioner Christian, that because there's no doubt in mine, that if this carbon capture sequestration racket were simply being pursued in the private sector, just private companies trying to make money off of doing a service, this would not be self-sustaining. The only reason why it even has facial viability is because it's being propped up with our money. That's what people have to understand. Why does nobody ever ask, if this were a private enterprise in a capitalist system, would it work? Would it be self-sustaining? Nobody ever asks that.
Now, Petronova that I mentioned earlier, the example that we had in Houston is exactly an example that went broke in 2 years. And it was the largest. Now it's opened back up just on the government dole. But here's your deal. We have a public that our university professors, a bunch of Vietnam draft dodging tenured professors, started telling our kids in universities all over Louisiana and Texas how dangerous the environment was, how oil and gas was terrible, how we were just the enemy with oil and gas. God's gift to our country, God's gift that helped win World War I, God's gift that helped win World War II, and God's gift that has put Texas and Louisiana as the hope of the free world today. We're sitting here with it designated by many in our population as being detrimental and bad. That false narrative, that false science, just like CO2, has been convincing a lot of our citizens everywhere, just like that little lady that's worried about the air and water her grandkids are going to. It's a non-existent problem. We're cleaner than any country. We have just lived through the most prosperous, cleanest last decade in all recorded human history. We are richer, we are cleaner, things are better off, but you wouldn't know it by listening to, number one, the politicians, number two, the special interest groups that want this money, and number three, the news media. It's all bad. It's all terrible. We're sitting there arguing over, say, natural gas flaring in Texas and Louisiana. This is natural gas, carbon capture, all this kind of stuff. Flaring methane. Right now, prior to COVID, it was 2.8% of all the gas being produced was being flared. During COVID, it went down to 1.8. Today, less than 1% of natural gas is being flared when you drill for oil. But they're still sitting out here trying to put all this regulation and dollars and protesting against less than 1%. Darling, if it's less than 1% in any industry, it ain't a problem. Go cure cancer with the money. Do something else with my grandkids' money besides sit here and capture carbon and this other stuff, which is totally a scam and a waste. Another, you hear carbon capture is a big deal. Let's get carbon credits. Carbon credits, listen to this, and this is what they propose, and our government goes along with. You buy a carbon credit, you're out polluting somewhere. You go buy a carbon credit, you keep polluting, you just aren't a bad guy for doing it. Why? Because somebody got the money. Guess who got the money on the carbon credits? Al Gore is the first environmental billionaire in the world. How did he do part of that? Well, all his movies and stuff and his speeches and all. But he and his brothers, his family, has an investment firm in London, England, that sells carbon credits. So what it amounts to is that Al Gore comes through and says, y'all are terrible. Y'all are hurting the environment with all this. So they go to Al Gore and give him money. Now it's okay. There's been no change in the damage to the environment. You just gave Al Gore some money for carbon credits.
And your ESG score doesn't go down, right?
That's right. Right. Exactly. It's all a scam and follow the money. But we have been duped by our education system and by our industry, which won't defend itself. And you talk to these corporations everywhere and they say, well, Mr. Christian, we agree with you. We all agree with you here, but We have to follow the will of our shareholders and their share. Let me tell you, the ones making the energy policy are these big seven, Exxon, Conoco, Oxy, all these other big multi-international. If you'll ask your state legislator how many of their shareholders live in the state of Louisiana, you'll find out it's very, very few, and most are international. So they're drawing energy policy at the bequest of lobbyists from these big seven, which are international corporations who don't live in Louisiana. I say, let's start listening to our independent people in the state of Louisiana and the independents in Texas who reside here, who do business here, and those are the ones we need to listen to on how Louisiana and Texas, our own people, not these international citizens of the world that we currently are listening to when we listen to these big internationals.
Great.
Yep. We've all had instances crop up where we could use the advice or skills of a trusted attorney. Whether you're looking at the implications of new laws for your business, signing a contract or a lease, looking to write a will or establish a trust, or even resolve a dispute with your credit card company, Legal Shield has got you covered. For over 50 years, Legal Shield has made it affordable and easy to access a dedicated lawyer. With the app, Legal Shield is like having a lawyer in your back pocket. For covered emergencies, Legal Shield is here for you 24/7, plans to fit any stage of life. The State of Freedom is proud to be teamed up with Legal Shield as clients and affiliates. To learn more or to sign up, visit the Shop Our Partners page on freedomstate.us or check out the link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the State of Freedom. Commissioner Christian, you have talked about the fact that we're in a fight, and I get the sense that you're optimistic about the days ahead. I'm so glad that you're in this fight because you are a very black and white person, which I appreciate. It's a total breath of fresh air for me because so many people want to strafe across the middle and just say, try and please everybody and say, that because no one wants to be called out as the person who hates the environment, right? It all boils back down to this name calling nonsense. Are you optimistic enough to say that the Trump administration will be the death of this carbon capture scam and this Green New Deal hoax?
No, not alone. It can't. We have a republic. We have a where the people rule. We the people, not Donald Trump, not our legislature. We the people rule. And if we the people continue to do what we've done, understand we've only had conservative control, pro oil and gas control, 4 of the past 16 years. And we rely on our politicians to fix all this. I'm sorry, when Jesus left the earth, he didn't put the government in control. He put the church in control. And I hear people saying, well, God's in control. Well, yes, he is, but he left the church in control until he comes again. And frankly, the church is abdicating its place and the citizens are abdicating their place. So unless citizens become educated, unless citizens become involved and continue to trust big brother government, no, Donald Trump won't be the final answer. If Donald Trump can turn the tide, and he is, every morning's like Christmas, we open our presents of what he did last night. It's
exactly.
Great. Okay, I am so thankful to have it. And yes, the direction the next 4 years is going to be marvelous. But whoever gets it the next Trump, we saw what happened when Biden got it. You saw what happened when Obama got it. And the only way we can protect that is we the people. And that's what's got to change.
Let me ask you this final question here, because something you said intrigued me, Commissioner Christian. You said that the church is not doing its job. Specifically, are you saying that the church needs to be reminding its congregation and reminding American Christians that we have primacy over the environment, that the environment and the planet exist to serve us? We don't exist to serve it. Yes, we have to be good stewards, but isn't that one of the fundamental roles of the church, for them to remind us and to emphasize that we have dominion over the earth? Our God is God, not Mother Earth, as you said. Is that what you mean when you say that the church, at least in part, what you mean when you say the church is abdicating its responsibility?
Yes, it's abdicating its responsibility for that. Yes, I agree, Chris, in what you're saying. But far beyond that, Governor Huckabee, 2 weeks before the election, I went to a meeting that he was giving a speech, and he said in this past election, he said that 35 million Christians had not registered to vote. There is not one election that those votes of the Christian people would not make a difference. So how can we as the church not be the salt and light and think it's going to be good? Do you really think politics is going to be better if we let Satan control it? And when the church abdicates itself and says, we're not going to be involved in politics, it's totally against the scripture. It's totally against my calling from God to be in the position I feel he has put me. And you're saying as a church, well, we're not going to have anything to do with that. And you'll hear church. Here's the stats. This is from of the churches in America today, and this is Barna polling. Okay, Barna polling, trusted poll. 70% of church members desire to be told from the pulpit how to believe, how to act on social issues, moral issues, governmental, political issues, just how to think of those issues. But only 6% of pastors will teach that. Why? Because the 30%, 70 want it, the 30% that don't want it will quit giving money, split the church, cause problems. So we sit back and listen to our churches say, well, we can't get involved in politics, so we'll lose our tax-exempt status. Hold it. They're worshiping the money here. Isn't that what we just said is causing the problems everywhere? Is follow the dollar.
Yes.
So the church will follow the dollar for tax purposes rather than the will of God.
Yeah.
So the church, I contest, is not being the salt and the light, and 94% of our pastors refused to talk social issues and politics from the pulpit. So we have a dumb, ignorant, godless society, and the church, yes, is totally responsible for it.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever heard it put that well. And it's unfortunate. As you were talking there, Commissioner Christian, I thought about the scene in the gospel where Jesus came in, one of several moments where he was enraged, and he drove the money changers out of the temple and said, "This is my Father's house, and you're turning it into a den of thieves." And that sort of touches on what you're saying as well. The exaltation of money, the fear that we're not going to be getting the donations and the contributions. That's not putting Christ first. It's really not. Commissioner Christian, you got to come over here to Louisiana. I don't know, where do you live in Texas, by the way?
10 miles from the Louisiana border, near Logansport, Louisiana, in center Texas.
I grew up in Shreveport, and I used to go over to the butcher shop in Longview just to go eat those hamburgers they have over there. But I'm from Shreveport, and you got to come over and come down to Baton Rouge, and maybe you can come down and testify before one of these committees. We'd love to have you.
I appreciate, honored to be with you today.
God bless you,
Such
sir.
a pleasure. Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.